All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are going deep into a frozen mystery. We're talking about letters written by Robert Walton. This guy was a sea captain exploring the Arctic way back in the 1700s. Imagine icy landscapes, right? And a ship basically trapped in the frozen ocean. And just this feeling of being completely isolated. It's so intense you can practically feel the chill centuries later. And in the middle of all of that, Walton rescues a stranger from the ice. This stranger might have the answer to a question that has bothered people forever. How far should we go to gain knowledge?
Well, the thing that really jumped out at me about Walton was his ambition. I mean, you can practically feel it coming off the pages. You know his letters. They paint this picture of him being like a total romantic about discovery. It's not like he's just looking for the North Pole. He wants to understand the magnetic north, almost like he thinks that if he figures that out, it'll unlock some big truth about,
Everything. Yeah, it's like he's going after something way bigger than just finding a spot on a map. And, mixed in with all that ambition, you see these flashes of how lonely he is. He talks about wanting a friend who gets what he's doing intellectually. Someone who doesn't just get the drive, that actually shares it.
Exactly. And that need for connection, it really makes the stranger showing up even more interesting. Think about it. Here's Walton with his crew, but feeling totally alone when it comes to his intellectual interests. Then all of a sudden, this guy appears out of nowhere from this massive, icy emptiness, riding a dog sled. It's almost like he came from Walton's deepest wish.
Right. It's like a dream. Or maybe like a nightmare. Given the shape he's in, the crew pulls him from the ice, and he's just barely hanging on. He's super skinny and frostbitten. Just a walking example of how brutal the Arctic can be.
And yet, there's just something about him that Walton is immediately drawn to. Even though he's so weak, Walton describes him as having this, aura of intelligence and nobility, like this inner strength that shines through all the physical hardship. He definitely sees something special in the stranger, something that makes him curious and pulls him in.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely more than just being thankful for the rescue. There's this, instant recognition, Walton sees a kindred spirit in this mysterious stranger. But then it gets even more complicated because the stranger really doesn't want to talk about himself. He's obviously got something weighing on him, like he's haunted by something. And the few hints he does give, well, they just make the mystery even bigger.
Yeah, and this is where we start to see the potential danger of knowledge, the kind of danger we're going to unravel as we go deeper into this. So he mentions that he was chasing someone, and he calls them a demon. Now, that word, it could mean a lot of things. Is it like an actual creature? Is it a metaphor for his own struggles? Or maybe something even deeper?
It really is like a puzzle box. Every time you think you're getting an answer, you just end up with more questions. So who or what was he chasing? What made him go to this desolate place? And how does this demon connect to the stranger's obvious pain?
Right. And you have to remember, he's not just sad. He seems genuinely tormented by something. It's like the knowledge he has, the very thing that makes him so interesting to Walton, has also become this source of huge suffering.
You get the feeling that his story goes way beyond just some adventure. There's real weight to it. And that's where I think you start to see Walton's fascination become something more. It's almost like an obsession. He sees the stranger's wisdom, how well-spoken he is, how deeply he understands people, and Walton becomes determined to help him heal. But I think he also wants to learn from him.
Yeah, and that whole dynamic between them, it's this mix of admiration, curiosity, and maybe even a little fear. It just adds another layer to the mystery. It's kind of like watching a moth drawn to a flame, even though it knows it might get burned.
Ooh, that's a good comparison. So we've got this driven captain, a mysterious stranger hiding some kind of heavy knowledge, and this intense pull between them that's only getting stronger. But here's where things get really interesting. After weeks of silence, the stranger agrees to tell his story. But he warns Walton that knowledge can be a double-edged sword.
That is such a crucial moment. It's like he's saying, look, I'll tell you my story, but be careful. What you learn might change you forever. It may even destroy you. And that just makes the suspense so much stronger. We're not just about to hear some adventure story. We're about to dive into something that could completely change how we understand the world and ourselves. It's really interesting how the stranger decides to finally tell his story. He doesn't just say, oh, hey, here's this exciting adventure I had. It's more like he's giving Walton a warning, like a burden he has to share. Even though it obviously hurts him to do it, he even compares his desire for knowledge to a serpent. Like it's poisoned him.
Yeah, that image is really powerful. It makes you think that the very thing that drove him, the pursuit of knowledge, has become the thing that's torturing him. Which, of course, just makes us want to hear what happened even more. But it's also a little scary, right? Like, what kind of knowledge could have such a bad effect?
Yeah, it's like he's giving Walton and us a glimpse into something forbidden. Like there are some truths, some things we could learn that we're better off not knowing.
Okay, so before we get into the actual story,
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the stranger finding peace in nature. Even though he's so miserable, Walton says he was really moved by the beauty of the Arctic, the huge ocean and the northern lights, even just the ice itself.
Well, what's interesting is that this connection to nature isn't just some random thing. It actually reflects this big philosophical movement of the time, Romanticism, like poets like Wordsworth and Coleridge. They believed that nature had this spiritual power, like it was a source of inspiration and healing. And the way the stranger reacts to the Arctic landscape totally fits with that idea.
So he's not just finding a distraction from his problems, he's actually getting strength from nature itself. Like he's tapping into something deeper, something meaningful and beautiful, even in this harsh environment.
Exactly. And that says a lot about him, about how sensitive and deep he is. Even though he's obviously dealing with some heavy stuff, he hasn't lost his ability to feel awe and wonder.
Which makes his warnings about knowledge even more interesting.
Right.
If he's someone who finds peace in nature,
Yeah.
in beauty and harmony, then what kind of knowledge could have messed him up so badly?
That's the big question hanging over everything as he starts to tell his story. And his story begins, maybe surprisingly, with a pretty normal childhood. He was born in Geneva, Switzerland, into a loving and wealthy family. He had good friends, loved to learn. It seemed like he had a bright future ahead of him. But even back then, there were signs of the darkness that was to come.
Well, yeah, for sure. He talks about being fascinated by life and death from a really young age. He becomes obsessed with this idea of conquering death, of figuring out the secrets of creation. And it's not just some creepy interest. He reads all these ancient texts on alchemy and natural philosophy. These old traditions that tried to understand the basic building blocks of everything.
What's fascinating is how what he was into as a kid foreshadows what he does later on. This isn't just some kid who thinks spooky stuff is cool. This is someone who is driven to figure out the mysteries of the universe. He wants to understand the forces behind life and death. And even as a child, you can sense that ambition burning inside him.
And as he gets older, that ambition just keeps growing. He becomes convinced that he can do what other people have only dreamed of, creating life itself. He's drawn to the newest scientific discoveries, pushing the limits of what's possible.
And here's where we start to see the danger of ambition without any limits. He gets so focused on his science that he isolates himself, ignores his friends and family, pushes himself until he's exhausted, basically sacrifices his own well-being, all for this grand pursuit.
He even says that he became like a machine,
Yeah.
just focused on this one goal, barely sleeping. Driven by this obsession, it's like he loses his humanity along the way.
Yeah, and that detachment, that willingness to push aside his own needs and even what's right and wrong, that's what lets him do what he does next. He actually brings his creature to life.
It's such an amazing and terrifying moment. He describes this being, made up of different body parts, coming alive with a jolt of electricity. I mean, just the brilliance it took to do that is incredible.
But the moment that creature opens its eyes, the stranger is hit with this wave of disgust and horror. He's repulsed by what he's created. It's like in that instant, he realizes what he's done. He's crossed a line that maybe shouldn't have been crossed. And the consequences are immediate and devastating.
The creature is abandoned by its creator, left to figure things out on its own, in a world that doesn't understand it, a world that's afraid of it and rejects it. It's a really sad image.
And the stranger is full of guilt and regret. He runs away from his creation, hoping to escape what he's done. But as we'll see, he can't outrun his past. The creature will find him and demand that he takes responsibility for what he brought into the world.
It's really like one of those classic Greek tragedies playing out in this frozen wasteland, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got this super smart, ambitious guy. He accomplishes this amazing thing. But by doing it, he unleashes all these forces that he totally can't control. And now he's on the run, haunted by what he created.
And it's not just a physical chase, is it?
No.
He's not just running from the creature, like literally. He's also trying to escape the guilt he feels. The realization that he brought something monstrous into the world? The torment inside him is just as bad as the chase itself.
Which takes us back to those warnings he gave Walton. Before he told his story, he said knowledge was a double-edged sword, and that wanting to know too much had poisoned him. Now that we know what he did, those warnings are even scarier.
Oh, for sure. This isn't just some story about scientists being too cocky. It's about how much knowledge can actually cost us. He's saying that some truths, some things we could learn, might come with a terrible price. And it's not just about personal suffering. It can affect other people, even the whole world.
Well, it's kind of like that myth about Pandora's box. Once you open it and all that bad stuff comes out, you can't just put it back in. You have to deal with it.
Yeah.
But there's another side to this, too. The creature. We talked about the stranger side of things. But what about how the creature sees all of this?
I think that's what makes the story so powerful. The creature isn't just a monster. It's a complex being. It can think and feel. It even has its own sense of right and wrong.
Like the guy babe.
Yeah. But it also wants to connect with someone, to be understood, even to be loved.
Which makes the way the stranger rejects it even more heartbreaking. It's not just that he created this being. He left it all alone to deal with the world. And that's really what causes this whole tragedy.
Absolutely. The creature isn't born evil. It becomes what it is because of how it's treated, rejected by its creator, hunted by everyone else. Those experiences are what make it angry and vengeful. It reflects the darkness that humanity shows it.
And the stranger is so desperate to get away from his past that he doesn't see that. He doesn't see that the creature could change. And by not seeing that, he just makes the violence worse.
It's a perfect example of unintended consequences, right?
Yeah.
The stranger's pursuit of knowledge,
Yeah.
his desire to create life, leads to something he doesn't understand, something he can't control. And then when he tries to fix it, he just makes things worse.
So then they finally meet face to face, the creator and his creation. It's this battle of wills between two beings who are both victims in their own way.
And it shows us that knowledge without compassion, ambition without empathy, those things can lead to destruction. All the stranger's brilliance and scientific achievements, they don't matter if he can't connect with his creation on a human level.
So the big question is, did Walton actually listen to the stranger's warning? Did he understand how much knowledge can cost? Did he get that you have to balance ambition with compassion? We don't know the answer from these letters.
Right, we don't.
But that's the thing about this story.
Yeah.
It makes you keep thinking about these questions. It makes us look at our own ambitions, our own desire for knowledge and understanding, and ask ourselves, what are we willing to sacrifice? And what could happen to us and to the world around us?
It's a really powerful message, and it still feels relevant today. Even though these letters are centuries old, we're still trying to figure out the ethics of scientific progress, the balance between ambition and responsibility. The stranger story reminds us that those questions aren't just philosophical ideas. They have real consequences that can change the world.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into this frozen mystery, I think the biggest thing to take away isn't the details of the story itself. It's the questions that makes us ask ourselves. It's a reminder to be careful, to be kind, and to remember that learning and knowledge should never come at the cost of our humanity.
That's a great way to put it.
Thanks for joining us on this journey to the Arctic and into the human soul. Until next time, keep exploring. But remember to do it with open hearts and thoughtful minds.